what if individuals as well as families can support their legacy planning by considering international diversification? I'd like to welcome Anne Liebgott to the Design Your Legacy podcast this lovely day. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you very much, Angelina. It's great to be here.
It's my pleasure to host you once again, and I believe you're joining from Mallorca across the pond in Spain.
Yes, exactly. Actually, I wanted to sit outside on my terrace this evening, but it's so stormy that I had to go into my living room.
Wonderful. So, would you like to share an icebreaker at all before we jump into the first question? I think you know how to fly fish, or would anything that you would like to share with the listeners and the viewers?
Okay, my name, like I said, is Anne Liebgott. I am actually domiciled in Switzerland. I run the platform AmericansWelcome.Swiss, which builds a bridge between mostly American, but also Canadian and Latin American investors looking for Swiss wealth management options, Swiss banks, Swiss wealth managers, and so on. And yes, I just arrived in Mallorca the other day to spend the holidays, and I'm very happy to be here. It's a little bit of change of scenery because in Switzerland we have everything except the Mediterranean Sea, and here I have the sea. So I'm very happy to be here and happy to speak with Angelina this evening.
Oh, thank you so much. Yep, it's 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time out on the West Coast of the United States. So it is a real treat. And so let's just jump right in. What is it that you're seeing right now in terms of what the affluent are thinking about? We chatted a bit about wealth preservation in the preamble. Where would you like to start us out today?
Well, I have to say that this year I have received so many phone calls and emails and messages from American clients who've said, we're kind of like fed up with what we have in the US, and we're really willing to explore other options. Switzerland being Switzerland, the very well-known, global leader in private wealth management. We actually want to discover what is available to us. What can we do? How can we do it? What amounts can we invest? How easy is it? Like what are all the conditions involved? And I must say that I've been quite a bit surprised that there's been such an interest this year in people really willing to explore and willing to learn, because a lot of times they need to learn about what's available. It's not that readily, it's not that, knowledgeable about what you can do. So it's been a very busy year this year so far.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I think that when individuals do come into wealth, we spoke about Harris's and daughters and the feminization of wealth again in our preamble. But when somebody considers a wealth strategy, particularly if they want options these days, if they're looking out at the international landscape, the political landscape, and they could feel a little bit like, what else is it that I need to know today to preserve what it is that I've built or that's been passed on to me?
That's very true. And the thing is, a lot of Americans, I mean, just by being American and being in the US and having the US financial advisors that they have and the banks that they have and so on, they do have a US centric portfolio. They do have a home bias.
Mhm.
And uh, there's nothing wrong with that per se, but you can complement your US centric portfolio and you can complement, let's say, your home bias based portfolio with something else. You can go international, you can go beyond the American bank system, and you can have jurisdictional diversification as well as international investment diversification in other markets.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think, like you had shared, a lot of times individuals might not know because if they haven't been exposed to what's available internationally, they might not realize how safe Switzerland is or that there's already relationships set up regarding, I think you called it SEC registered advisors that can already, um, educate them and also just let them know what it is that they too are seeing in the international marketplace, whether somebody's an expat and they're traveling with their family as a part of their work, or they just are unsure about, where are the best investments in the future. And like we had talked about in the preamble, it may not even be speculative. This is like a long-term strategy. This isn't short-term tactics.
No, of course not. This is actually a long-term strategy. It even goes beyond your own generation. It goes to the next generation. And in this era where we have an increased global mobility, if you want to call it that, global mobility, where the next generation, I mean, for them, it's actually, a given almost that they'll say, I'll live in other countries, I'll have homes in I'll have residences in other countries, I'll travel around, I'll work in other places and so on. They're moving a bit away from this very traditional, I have my homestead in the US where my grandparents lived and my parents lived and so on. For them, this idea of having Switzerland as a, global financial hub, it's much easier for them to organize that and to establish that and to feel comfortable with that than previous generations.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about reacting to headlines for a moment. How can
Okay.
someone start in terms of initial baby steps to consider Switzerland or international diversification? I know that you've also broadened your websites to include the United Kingdom and Latin America and Asia now.
Well, thanks that you noticed that. Of course, I mean, going to a platform that provides the information is a very easy step to move forward. But in general, the idea is there has to be a willingness or yeah, an idea of I want to diversify. I'm willing to go jurisdictional to another jurisdiction. I'm willing to move my assets abroad, at least part of my assets. And then, of course, it has to do with finding the perfect fit. And that means homework. And that means, reviewing the wealth managers that are there, reviewing the custodian banks that are available, and then really trying to find what you feel is the perfect fit. Basically, I say, everybody cooks with water. So, what's the special sauce? What's the special ingredient that you're looking for? It usually has to do with chemistry. It has to do with, like how do you feel if they're moving in your direction or not? How is their management strategy and so on. That's where the ADV part two, I have to mention that the ADV part two brochure comes in for the SEC registered investment advisors. If you read that, you get a narrative version of everything they do. And that's very, very helpful in narrowing down your choice of who you'd like to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that in the last 12 months, again, as we had chatted in our preamble, that you've had more phone calls this year, as this year has definitely been a time of challenges and a learning curve. So what are some of the initial questions that individuals have asked you regarding Switzerland?
Okay, well, first of all, some people ask, how easy is it to get in? And
Mm,
side, they ask, how easy is it to get out? So
I,
once I'm established in Switzerland,
mhm.
if I, need my funds for something else, or, I want to buy a new home, or I need to invest something else, how easily can I get my funds out again? Once I've put them there. And of course, it's as easy as one, two, three. It's as easy as getting established. Actually, it's easier than getting established because to get established, you have to go through the whole, anti-money laundering, know your client process and so on. And getting your money out is actually just a matter of days, maybe a week or so. Then you can do that. And I think that the Americans that want to invest in Switzerland, they're doing it, like I said in our preamble, they're doing it for wealth preservation reasons and
Mhm.
not to have like a current account with credit cards and you can move your funds in and out and in and out and in and out. It's more a longer term
Longer term
legacy
play.
preservation strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, I think it I think that when somebody asks those questions of how easy is it to get in, because we always have this idea about how hard is it to establish a bank account when you're overseas and who do you go to and how do you do it and what's real versus trying to sift through YouTube videos or friends and associates that have bits and pieces, but as you know, when somebody becomes wealthier, it becomes more complex. It becomes more sophisticated. It's not just, there's more moving parts and pieces.
Oh, of course, that's very true. But the great thing is is that once you've narrowed down the Swiss SEC registered investment advisor that you want to work with, be it a bank related, be it a independent wealth manager in Switzerland, be it already down to like the one man show or the family owned enterprise and so on. Once you're with them, they will guide you through the whole process of opening up the custodian bank account.
Hmm.
And that can be done online. That can be done from the comfort of your home. You don't have to travel to Switzerland. You don't have to deal with the bank itself per se. You have to provide the documentation and the signatures and the passport copies and so on. But your Swiss SEC registered investment advisor, they will guide you and handhold you through the process. So it's actually easygoing.
Yeah, so let me bring up Switzerland and its history for a moment. It's often associated with stability as well as neutrality. How do these cultural values translate into a fundamentally different approach to wealth stewardship?
Yeah, well, of course, in Switzerland, I mean, we've been here since 1291, so it's a very, very old country. And the whole Swiss financial industry that has been here for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it has been refined and developed and sophisticated over all the years and so on. And I think the major thing is that Swiss financial advisors or wealth managers or bankers, they have such a high level of internationally developed education. So they are adept to all kinds of international grooves, you know, um, along with their domestic, operations that they have. And what I always think is a funny point is that Switzerland is 6 hours or 9 hours before any markets open in the US. We're 6 hours ahead of the East Coast, we're 9 hours ahead of the West Coast. And the dealers and the bankers and the wealth managers, they have this head start on the day, you know, uh, versus an American advisor, which are very excellent. I mean, I don't want to say anything about, we're not I just think that Swiss advisors are not a competitor to American advisors. They are a complement to them. And that's, I think, what you have to remember. They're not competing, they're
Mhm.
complement.
Well, absolutely. I think that when an individual begins to either steward money that they've never had before, as in two-thirds of
Yeah,
today's affluent are self-made,
yeah.
or they then receive an inheritance, I think that they want to know, how do I diversify the smartest way that I can? Because when somebody gets used to a lifestyle, not even just a lifestyle, a certain portfolio amount, they don't want to lose it. Like you had talked about wealth preservation. They want to figure out, how do I spread out all of my eggs in the basket, or so it's not in one basket.
No, of course not. And I mean, Switzerland happens to be one of the most wealthy countries in the world. There's a lot of Swiss families with old money. There are some Swiss families with new money. And there is a certain, let's say, Swiss wealth management style,
Mhm.
which is working for these families for hundreds of years. And Swiss wealth managers are happy to share that kind of Swiss style wealth management to other families around the world, not just the US, but around
Mhm.
the world otherwise. And when they come into money or when they have money, or even when it's old money, there's a lot of advice that can be gleamed or can be, yeah, taken from these Swiss families that have had this wealth over hundreds of years and have maintained it. Because a lot of times they say, wealth has disappeared in 3 generations or something like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And in Switzerland, that is not really the case. We have a more conservative, perhaps, view of how to deal with family wealth over generations, and that's why it's still there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that knowledge, if somebody can begin to learn, because this is beyond just their business that's straight in front of them, or their, pardon me, it's I think complementary knowledge of There's this particular psychologist out of New Hampshire. He wrote this book called Strangers in Paradise about when somebody becomes affluent and they get to almost move to this metaphoric island. And then the question becomes, how do you stay on that island? And there could be
Yeah.
rules around how somebody dresses and how they speak and social mannerisms and so forth. And I think what comes with when somebody has an opportunity to diversify, it's how do you stay on that island? And then as you talk to the other people on that island, like you had said regarding Swiss families, how is it that they have been able to maintain that wealth in the stewardship? Decade after decade, generation after generation? What is it that they know? Where is it that they are conservative and where is it that they may have some flexibility as times change? Like when you talked about political headlines and how the political landscape can change many times and what is their staying power? Because these are the
Of course.
conversations
Well,
that
yeah,
matter.
staying power, let's just call it also resilience. Um,
Hmm.
Resilience has always been a very a Swiss feature because Switzerland is a very small country, embedded in the heart of Europe. And Switzerland has also had its economic, ups and downs and challenges over the years. But Switzerland just simply has a very strong resilience in how to handle and how to manage any and all kinds of crises. That's why Fitch and Standard and Poor's and so on, they still rate Switzerland as a triple A country plus with outlook stable and so on. Even after any kind of let's say negative headlines or COVID experiences back then and so on. And so that's why Switzerland is still standing strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about something other than money, because I know that there's other
Yeah,
advisors that say, they've said to me, oh, everyone's talking about the money, but no one's talking about anything else. So let me bring up for a moment that there
yeah.
is a role that jurisdictional diversification plays in protecting assets. But speak to me for a moment about family continuity and peace of mind across generations. How can Switzerland then also be a benefit to family continuity and peace of
Well,
mind?
I know what you're talking about. I know you did an interview not too long ago with three colleagues, and let's just call it family governance, if you want to call it that. And as we know, problems, of course, can occur within a family with multiple generations, with multiple interests, with multiple disinterests in family business, and so on and so forth. And this whole idea about family governance and trying to find at least common a common denominator of how to move forward and so on. Um, there, I really have to say, I've seen it myself happening, that having an external person to review and help along and moderate and, whatever with these families, that helps a lot. And this Swiss style, because it's so a little bit low key and no one is actually trying to um, trick anybody out of something. Nobody is trying to say, oh, if I put the wealth there, there, or there, there'll be more profit for me. It's really a neutral, very constructive situation that these fifth Swiss, family governance services, they can help a lot. And especially because I think then Americans who have, this American perspective, they get another perspective, which they can weigh in and say, yeah, this might be worthwhile considering moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was also a podcast guest, Jan Petke, that spoke about how so many people are talking about the money, but they're forgetting also to talk about other items. But you're absolutely right. A few of the associates in Switzerland, Maxim,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well as
yeah.
Danny and Daniel, and they talked specifically about in families, like you had said, where's the common denominator, as well as how do we talk through what is known as like the red lines of what it is we're not supposed to talk about. But if there is money loss, oh, you're going to see some emotions in that room. If somebody may have,
Yes,
and then,
yes, yes, of course. Yes, of
yeah,
course. And I think uh, it's becoming more and more acceptable to bring all these issues to the table. In the past, and not that long ago, nobody would talk about it. As the family patriarch, he would maybe pass away, and then they were confronted with, you know, and now bringing all these issues to the table, I think the family patriarch is also more comfortable with bringing these issues to the table so that he knows that these issues can be dealt with during his lifetime and not that there's going to be a whole, hullabaloo once he passes.
Well, absolutely. I think today people are becoming more transparent. I'm not sure if it's like happening globally as like an overall cultural shift to be more transparent in the conversations about money and all of these topics that were silent in generations past. But I think that when there is more transparency, there can be a higher probability for a meeting of the minds so people don't feel like strangers in the same room.
Well, absolutely. And I think this transparency is one thing, but trying to find a goable route into the future. And we're not even talking about the next generation necessarily. We're talking about the generation after the next generation. And people are beginning to, think beyond of, okay, right after me comes my son, but right after, or my daughter. But
Mhm.
right after that, we have grandchildren, and they're also going to have children. And so you can actually take your wealth, which is these days it can be a huge amount,
Mhm.
like you said, the heirs and so on that's coming up, and it's worthwhile definitely to try and put a frame around it and a form around it that workable for everybody.
Yes, well, and we did chat about the feminization of wealth. And so I think you had shared that many times daughters may choose advisors and brand new associates that maybe her parents didn't pick. But she's still going to want, like you had said, to have the group discussions in the room of what worked for you. And let's all talk about this in a group setting compared to her just making a decision internally. I think women oftentimes will ask for opinions, maybe even 2 to 3 opinions before they talk, looking and then leaping, not leaping and then not looking.
Well, of course, it's a path of discovery.
Hmm.
A lot of daughters have not necessarily been forced into roles within companies or been forced into roles within families, but as they grow older and as they mature and as they move more into the family wealth and so on, they do realize that there are areas where they need to have more information, where they need to have more support, where they need to have, they want to know what's going on. They don't want to be left like, in the dark. Everyone else knows about everything and they don't know about anything. So they're moving into that. And yes, in general, I would agree that females are more ready to listen to various opinions and listen to various sources of information, and then to gather this information and to come up with a decision in their own mind.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I think women in particular, want to have as much information at their fingertips as possible because if they are walking into a new landscape, I'm going to bring up widows as well as daughters, for
Oh, of
instance.
course, yeah.
I mean, that's a whole niche right there. And I always bring up this metaphor about if you've never asked a woman to go out yachting and you put her out into the middle of a yacht race and she doesn't even know the word starboard, she's going to want to probably overcompensate and have too much information so that she feels like she is going to survive.
Yeah, that's true as well. And I think that I mean, I'm a female myself, so I can just say we have a lot of female intuition. We can go by that to a certain extent. And I think that this whole idea of women discovering maybe new investment managers, like you said, not the one from the parents had before, discovering, learning, and making an equation at the end and saying, this is the route I want to take. I think that's very, very smart. And I think that's what they need to do as well. I think they don't need to just stay with what has already been there in the past.
Hmm. I think it's going to be what works for today's client or what works for her if she is the client compared to what worked yesterday. Because you're right, the
Yeah.
world is changing so fast, but some things are going to stay the same, like stability in Switzerland. But then it's a matter of how can that particular client's questions get answered?
Yeah, well, of course. in Switzerland with our Swiss SEC registered investment advisors, I mean, they are really in tune to that they have to deliver a different service than an American client gets, for example, at Morgan or at Schwab or what Merrill Lynch or wherever. I mean, in Switzerland, we don't have such huge client bases for each individual SEC registered investment advisor, and they're individual. That's just the thing. We don't have, so in Switzerland, these wealth managers don't have like a, you know, an off the shelf product where they shove in, you know, thousands of clients and stuff like that. It's all very individual and all very, high end client service and so on. So I think there, the real important thing is that investors, if they're female or if they're not female, it doesn't matter, that they ask all the questions they want and they also get the answers that they feel comfortable with.
Yeah,
That's the most
absolutely.
important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's speak about mindset for a moment. So absolutely, I've spent some time in Europe. I've been to Switzerland, and when somebody has the opportunity to travel, they experience that there's a variety of mindsets in this world, which just makes it a more wonderful, richer place. So many affluent Americans can feel uneasy and unsure where to start. What is the first thought shift that you would encourage before any money ever moves?
I think the first thought shift has to be um, I feel comfortable with moving some assets abroad. Never mind where. You feel
Mhm.
comfortable with the idea that you don't have all of your assets within the US financial system, with your US bank, with your present investment advisor. On the other hand, I say the present US investment advisor can absolutely be involved in the process of finding and of choosing the Swiss SEC registered investment advisor to manage a portion of the assets that you want to hold abroad. It does not have to be black and white, you know, US there and Switzerland there.
Mhm.
It's actually better if it's a collaboration. Okay? So that people feel comfortable. And I think from the US side of the story, I think, you know, all the US investment advisors, they have what they call a fiduciary obligation. And a fiduciary obligation means you're handling in your client's best interests. And as a US fiduciary, SEC registered investment advisor, I think it is smart to speak to your clients about the idea of jurisdictional diversification because I think it's part of the equation these days. And so I think that, like I said, it's not a competition, it's a collaboration. And so I think these US advisors that might, you know, think, oh no, my clients are leaving me and so on and so on, they should look at it with a different mindset. We're talking about mindset before. They should
Mhm.
look at it as this is what we need to do today to make this, you know, risk management, risk diversification actually correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes Americans, when they have deposits in a particular US bank, they might actually own shares in that bank and not even realize it in terms of the fine print. So I think a part of the financial literacy and the financial sophistication comes down oftentimes to the fine print and understanding the contracts and the agreements and the benefit of diversifying so that they, like I said before, like eggs can be in multiple baskets, multiple jurisdictions. And
Oh, of course.
so, yeah, especially because the US dollar, you know, we could talk about inflation for a moment and realizing that even investing even in other currencies, not that that is the topic of today's conversation, but just to be as smart as possible and setting aside the time to become knowledgeable. And
Well, it's definitely, I would say it is definitely part of the conversation because multi-currency diversification is important, especially with regard to the Swiss franc. I mean, the Swiss franc is a very strong currency. It has gained in value over the US dollar, I don't know, let's say 80% over many years. And you know, if you're an American and you take your US dollars and you invest it in Swiss francs, and let's say 10 years down the road, you take those same Swiss franc investment and you put it back to US dollars, you'll have an even higher return on investment than you do just on your investment because of the currency exchange difference. And I think that is a very important factor. And that's one of the big reasons why not just American clients, but clients from around the world like to invest in Switzerland and Swiss francs because it is considered a safe haven currency, especially in times of volatility or turmoil and so on. Yeah. And another thing I'd like to mention is that, as we know, gold has now just reached new, record prices. And gold holding in Switzerland is like a tradition, it's a standard. And you can hold precious metals in Switzerland, within a bank account or directly in a private vault and so on. And holding physical gold in Switzerland is actually easy to do. If you have a Swiss SEC registered investment advisor, it's even easier because they know all the doors and everything like that and so on. And that's something that a lot of Americans have contacted me this year as well as like, how can I hold physical gold in Switzerland?
Well, absolutely. I think the bottom line question is how do I make this work?
Yeah, well, like I said, my suggestion is always get in touch with the Swiss SEC registered investment advisor. They're registered with the SEC so that they can provide services to American clients domiciled in the US or domiciled abroad. And I'm not just talking about American citizens. I'm talking about US persons that, are domiciled in the US, maybe have a green card or are working there. And there's another new thing that's actually quite interesting. Donald Trump has now introduced his so-called Donald Trump Gold Visa, which is an EB1 or EB2 visa with this new title, Donald Trump Gold, whatever. And there, if you are a non-American who opts in for this kind of visa program and you have assets abroad, your assets abroad become taxable according to US tax obligations. So before you go to the US, you want to structure your assets so that they are, let's say, less prone to US tax obligations on all foreign held assets and all foreign income. If you can do that, with various structures and so on. So it's very, very important that you do pre-immigration planning. And that's a door that is now really wide open for people who want to become American residents.
I'm glad that you brought up that point because as we chatted about in our preamble, so much is changing in the world today. Not only does an individual would they benefit from diversification, but also when they think about safety in the future and feeling like they've got some type of personal agency and how do they move, not just, physically move from one geographic location or from one jurisdiction, but also how do they live in such a way and invest in such a way that they feel like their future is secure. Because it wasn't like it was 100 years ago, or even like if I think about my grandparents and so
Yeah.
on. I think that knowledge is so important. And even with this new visa, that didn't exist 100 years ago as the political landscape changes.
No, I think it started to exist about a month ago.
Yeah.
Not even. No, I think what Switzerland really has to offer, like I said, Americans is one thing, but Switzerland, like I said, is the global leader for international private wealth management with, like over 25% of the market in the world. And so it's not just for Americans, it's for other nationalities as well. And Switzerland is just a ideal, let's say, financial hub. So if you don't have to live and work in Switzerland. You can just have Switzerland as a banking financial hub. And let's say you're an expat, like you mentioned before, you might stay some years in Switzerland. You might go to Asia. You might go to Africa. You might go to Dubai, or you might go to London. And do you want to switch your whole banking system and your whole wealth management? Do you want to have to switch that every time you change a location? No. You actually want to stay with something that's like stable, that you know it's going to be there next year, that you know you have access to your funds easily, that we don't have things, like restrictions and, clamp downs on closing accounts and so on, like we've seen in Greece in the past and other countries and so on. That's what you actually want. So as a mobile American or as a mobile other individual, Switzerland is just an excellent hub for banking relationships and wealth management services.
Wonderful. So how does Americans Welcome Switzerland serve as a bridge culturally, emotionally, etc., between American investors and the Swiss financial ecosystem?
Well, of course, they can browse the platform, which is americanswelcome.swiss, and they're welcome to call me to ask for a consultation and I'm neutral. I don't promote any particular Swiss wealth manager or any Swiss bank. I'm a neutral platform, and I've seen this year that so many people have visited the platform. They've chosen their few, SEC registered investment advisors that are interested in, but they still want to speak to me because they say, I'd like some background knowledge. I'd like some just, general questions I have about the whole thing. And I'm happy to take these questions. I'm happy to answer. Um, Sometimes I can't help in every single case, but I do my best, and I'm happy to point people in the direction which should help them best.
Yeah, absolutely. So why is it so critical in today's regulatory climate to work with an SEC Swiss wealth manager? Have you seen somebody cut a corner or say more, if you would?
Okay, well, the thing is, no Swiss bank will take on an American client unless they come through an SEC registered investment advisor.
Good to know. Okay.
Okay, so if you're an American and you want to have an account in Switzerland and you're not domiciled in Switzerland, then the only way to do it is to go through a Swiss SEC registered investment advisor. Now, we have investment advisors in Switzerland that have a minimum amount of investment from $100,000, and another level is 500,000, and then another level is 1 million, and then it goes up from there.
Mhm.
So that you need to have. Otherwise, you will not be able to have a custodian bank in Switzerland. But I'd also like to mention that there are Swiss SEC registered investment advisors that offer custodian banks in Monaco, in Liechtenstein, in Singapore, and even in the US if one wants to hold assets within the US, having them managed by a Swiss investment manager. And that's not really the motivation for the American, because the American says, I want to be outside of the US banking system. But if they prefer to have the US banking system, they can do so.
I think that's so good to know. Again, knowledge is power, and particularly if one can be proactive in their planning, which brings me to the next question. From your experiences, what mistakes do high achievers make when they delay global diversification until it feels urgent?
Well, I think first of all, you need to get established, and getting established takes a little bit of time. And if you're doing it in a rush, if you're doing it at the last minute, if you're doing it because you feel, I have my knife at my neck and I now have to do it, it's a stress factor to do it. You don't need to wait. You can get it set up now, and you can, I know a lot of clients, they start with, let's say, the minimum amount of investment, just let's say 1 million, just to say. They start with 1 million because they say, I want to get established. I want to have my account there. I want to have whatever. And they come afterwards, shortly afterwards, even, with, let's just say 10 million, you
Mhm.
know. And I think the thing is, getting established is the most important thing. And once you've done that, then I have it, it's there. I can add funds if I want to. I can even deduct funds if I want to, if I need to for some reason, and so on. So I think that's a very important factor, that you just have to get over this idea that you don't have to come with, 10 million at one time, or 100 million, or 600 million. I mean, we have clients like that come with these amounts, but you can just get established first. And then once you're there, you can then decide as time goes by, do I want to add more or do I not want to add more? So I think this whole idea of just getting established, going through the motions, and they see how doable it is, how easy it is, and so on, that's something that they shouldn't put off until it gets to be a panic moment.
Yeah, I think that that's brilliant advice. One of the things that in preparation for today, I saw in some notes of or the due diligence, wise planning is always smart compared to uh, not doing it and then buying into outdated narratives or fear-based myths or misinformation, all that stuff. And you're absolutely right. Somebody doesn't have to just jump in and be in over their head. They can dip their toe in the water and start, like you had said, when people call you, they're gathering information. They're saying
Yes.
there's this big world out there. How do I dance with it? How do I start? And even
Yeah.
this idea of getting established.
Yes. It's exactly that. And, sometimes I think it's less now than it used to be, but this whole idea of, the distance and the time difference and so on. I mean, with today's communication and so on, you drop an email, drop a WhatsApp.
Hmm.
It's much easier to stay in tune. Swiss wealth managers, they're basically available at all times, more or less. You know what I mean? It's like it's not like it's only between that hour and that hour in the US, like business hours. We have different hours, and going on into the evening, it's never a problem. I mean, I have conversations with people, at 10 in the evening, if that suits their program in California, for example, or in Hawaii and so on. And it's very flexible that way. It's very flexible, and it's very client based, it's client oriented. And I think that makes the people feel more comfortable, even though there is a distance.
Well, absolutely. I think also with technologies these days, people, like you had mentioned, whether it's through text messaging or platforms like Telegram, it could be a conversation at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. or something. And I think in particular, the Swiss advisors that do work with Americans realize that sometimes their busiest hours might be between 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. the
Yeah,
weeknights.
of course, of course,
Yeah.
of course, of course. And and especially it's when everything runs smoothly, let's say, and the markets are all fine,
Hmm.
there's less to do and say. But as
Hmm.
soon as there is like volatility or geopolitical, black swans or things like that that pop up, that's when clients actually really start to think about or get nervous, if you want to call it that, and think, oh, what's happening? What's my manager doing? And so on. And that's where Swiss wealth managers have been trained to have a proactive communication and
Hmm.
not just wait, until a client, sitting in
Reacts.
California, yeah, reacts and says, "Oh, I heard of this, new war that has cropped up, wherever, or something that's happened. Like, what should I do? What does that mean?" You know,
Hmm.
and in Switzerland, funny enough, with the pulse on the markets and international markets that Switzerland actually has, um, in Switzerland, there's less of a panic reaction to geopolitical problems that pop up. It's always a little bit more of a oh yes, okay, and we wait and we see and we take a look and we analyze and we make a proper decision along the way. It's not panic. It's not panic. We have to get
Hmm.
out. Something like that. Yeah.
That reminds me of
Yeah.
like New York
It's more
City.
a long term. It's a more a long-term relationship to wealth management than a short-term reaction.
Oh, that's good to know. So, how does the Swiss wealth philosophy support a longer term view of legacy? And I think this is an important question because, again, we often don't even think about legacy, and proper planning is ideal, particularly when families need that glue. I call it the invisible Velcro of the universe. When people can
Okay.
come together and talk about values or restraint and preservation, it's like we need these conversations, but sometimes we don't know we need these conversations until yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think in Switzerland, like I said, it's always been multi-generational. Okay. It's
Hmm.
a normal mindset to think multi-generational. And it's also a mindset to think, in more calm, maybe a little bit more conservative ways. And in Switzerland, we were talking before a little bit about family governance and so on. It is absolutely normal to include next generations and even the next generations after that. and to have the concerns and have the let's say the planning to say what can we provide the next generation and the generation after that. So I think from a legacy point of view, um, the Swiss wealth management strategy in general is actually completely laid out for multi-generational wealth management. And this goes beyond just wealth management. This goes, into like, just for example, if the patriarch from a family, he passes away and he has a company, and you have the company there, and the next generation is supposed to take care of it, and you have things like, tax issues that crop up in the US, and inheritance issues and estate planning issues and so on. These things need to be taken into consideration in the entire wealth planning realm of the family. And that's why it's very important, if you have a neutral Swiss view of how to do that, that makes it easier sometimes for family members to accept what needs to be done than if you have advisor one, advisor two, advisor three, advisor four, the father's advisor, the son's advisor, the other advisor, and the other advisor, all advising. You can have like a little bit of an overview from a Swiss perspective. And then you can say, okay, we can go with that, or we want to adopt that, or we want to, adapt that to a certain extent. And I think that makes it just easier for families to decide what they can do, because they have a neutral, a level above analyst, to say what you need as a family.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I also wrote down in preparation for today's conversation, that there's a deeper truth around that the real challenge isn't whether to diversify internationally, but how to do so with clarity, compliance, values, alignment, and long-term intention. And also that international diversification isn't just a technical move, but it's also a legacy architecture decision. If somebody is going to kick the soccer ball forward and think long-term, it's not
Yeah.
just necessarily the next 5 or 10 years, it's the next 50, 100, and so forth in.
Yes, you can look at it that way as well. But there's also another aspect that joins in with this, and that is, global mobility. And
Hmm.
that a lot of families, let's just say in the US, for example, they are becoming more and more aware and exploring, in the next generations especially, to the idea of moving beyond their borders
Hmm.
physically,
Hmm.
having new residencies, having new homes, providing, let's say, better education for their children, looking for schools and not just sending them to boarding school, but finding a country with the lifestyle where they actually can say, our children are going to have a better education than what's available nowadays, and a better lifestyle and a better, cultural influence than
Hmm.
you might get in the US, depending where you live, and so on and so forth. So this whole idea of this global mobility, that's also becoming a very, very important factor in how families want to govern themselves and govern their wealth moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that with amazing teachers also, then the children that are coming up, the next generation, the heirs and so forth, they have to really have great critical thinking skills. They just can't go to ChatGPT for the answers of the world today or tomorrow, and the complexity of, how do they respond? How do they proactively decide whether to choose door A, door B? And yeah, so absolutely. I think that mentors and great teachers that aren't just going to let them slide through and using
Well,
AI.
that's where diversification actually plays a large role, because, like you said, you don't want to place all your eggs in one basket. You don't want to go with just one financial advisor. You don't want to go with just one strategy. You want to be able to divide things up a little bit, and out of various financial systems. I mean, Switzerland, just to be honest, I mean, Switzerland is not the only financial center that has capabilities and capacity. I mean, we have Singapore, which is kind of like up and rising and so on. I mean, Dubai, okay, big question mark behind Dubai, of course, because it's kind of like the renegade, of the Middle East and so on. But I think the whole idea of be feeling comfortable, I think that's one of the main things. People have to feel comfortable with what they're doing. People have to feel comfortable. The older generation has to feel comfortable that my kids are making the right decision. The kids have to feel comfortable with we're making the right decision. And the next generation after them have to feel comfortable with what, oh, I think they're making the right decisions, so that we're going to be okay. And I think this feeling of making a right decision, you almost can't go wrong with Switzerland because it's established, it's been here for hundreds of years. There's not really there's not really a risk or like a risque idea of, okay, if I hold some of my assets in Switzerland, I'm doing something really risky. No, you're not.
Hmm.
It's so been there for hundreds of years. So I think that's important also for all the generations to realize that if they want to hold some assets in Switzerland, if you do it as a family or as an individual or in a family office or how you want to do it, you're actually kind of buying a peace of mind.
Well, absolutely. I think it's that psychological piece.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're not going wrong by doing this. You could do other things as well, of course, but with having this peace in Switzerland, you have a peace of mind.
Absolutely. I might call it intergenerational continuity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
definitely.
so if I could put you on the spot for a moment in one or two
Okay, try.
sentences, yeah. What would you like your legacy to be in one or two sentences? I know I asked this last
My
time.
own personal. Yeah, you asked me last time. Well, we have all these things about leaving a footprint and, changing the world for the better and all these kind of things. And I think even if you don't do it in a major way, you're still doing it, you know? So I think that you can invest your energy in something beneficial and just enjoy that aspect that if you're not contributing in a huge way, you're still contributing,
Mhm.
you know? And of course, something that you feel, proud of, that you feel that I'm actually, doing something and I'm actually providing some kind of service that's helpful for others. And like I sometimes, after these 2 hours conversations that I have with some of these people that have called me this year, I'm like, at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, if I have been able to help them in a way to feel more comfortable, I'm happy for that.
Well, absolutely. And I think again, knowledge is power and education is important. Who do you go to when you have to make brand new decisions in terms of who do you trust in this world today? Like you had spoken about, even with advisors and how who do you listen to and how do you choose? And it's
Well, that's why I've heard a lot of people saying to me, I like to talk to you because you're neutral. And if I'm talking to an investment advisor himself, of course he's trying to, sell me his service.
mhm,
But if I'm talking to you, you're so neutral. And I've always said, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a
mhm.
wealth manager. I can't provide you that kind of information, but I can provide you with certain background information. I can provide you with, um, let's say, how things are done, the way things are done, the methods that are used and so on in Switzerland. And if that makes you feel more comfortable in taking the next step, then I'm happy to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to close out our conversation today by saying that I think a lot of times people, when they call you, for instance, they want to know again, what is it that works? And what is it that I need to know? Because I've got to
Exactly.
look before I leap.
Education. Education. Always.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And the details matter. The details always matter. Like when you
They
spoke about,
always matter. Yeah,
yeah,
I agree. I agree. And I've always said, ask questions, ask questions. Don't hesitate in asking questions. And there's no such thing as we know, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Please feel free to ask. The main thing is that you feel comfortable moving forward.
yeah, absolutely. So what is a good website for the listeners and the viewers?
Okay, my website is americanswelcome.swiss. Of course, you mentioned the UK and Asia, but that's not so important right now. It's americanswelcome.swiss. And one can just browse around, take a look, do their homework. And like I said, if they feel so inclined, they can get in contact with me, and I'm happy to have a conversation.
Wonderful. I want to circle back to the intention that we said at the beginning of today's episode, which had to do with the question of what if individuals and families can support their legacy planning by including international diversification. I think we have fulfilled that business promise. Some of the topics that we chatted about in the last hour or so included understanding that a Swiss strategy only complements the US based portfolio, and that there is much to know regarding establishing oneself in addition to opening up a new account in Switzerland, whether that's with a custodian bank or creating a new relationship with a wealth manager in Switzerland, that the culture might be slightly different, but there is an opportunity to grow and to learn regarding perhaps a slower pace when somebody thinks about perhaps if they're advisors in New York City and everything's happening in a New York minute, for instance. But at the same time, there's so much to learn from Swiss families, particularly regarding their management style and how they have preserved their wealth over generations as well as centuries in the mindset that's needed as well as best practices. And also that when it comes to family governance, that there is a benefit to finding that common denominator, and perhaps that is the education around diversification when there is multiple interests in a room, and also that when someone can learn about Swiss francs and also that brand new Trump visa, that there's a whole world ahead for
Oh,
them. Yes. So thank you very much for being a guest today and for your time in this collaboration.
thank you very much, Angelina. It's always a pleasure.
So I will close this out. And one more time, if you would share the website for the listeners and the viewers.
It's americanswelcome.swiss.
Okay. Thank you so much, Anne. Okay. In closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder of Two Legacy Planning, a boutique coaching and advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, United States, but international in those I get to coach and consult. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person to find, develop, and execute their legacy and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners and viewers, there can never be enough education and preparation in the moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content on this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're tuning in on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, etc., please remember to rate and review, share with your family and friends. And if you feel so inclined, send an email to either Anne Liebgott or myself and let us know your thoughts and feelings about today's conversation. So thank you so much for joining. And thank you, Anne, for once again speaking into your legacy.
Thank you very much.